Watchdog group Judicial Watch released a series of documents which revealed that the Obama administration spent $9 million colluding with George Soros in Albania. Then there's also this report also posted today that George Soros also made his first, on record at least, donation to a Oregon candidate. The current governor of Oregon, Kate Brown, received a $25,000 donation from George Soros, although he is a generous supporter of Democratic candidates and causes nationally. He hasn't previously given to an Oregon candidate. His check shows Brown continues to make inroads with national funders. What does Brown's campaign say? Brown's campaign has said, spokesman Christian Gaston says the contribution is a sign that Brown's work has gained traction. Quote they gave was that the progress Oregon has made over the last 3 years is being recognized across the country. They say it's where progressive policies can move forward while Washington, D.C. is mired in politics. So it's kind of a vague reason that they're giving. Now, it's also coincidental, and I think that this may be one of the key real reasons that Brown had received this $25,000 bribe, I guess some could describe it as, from George Soros. Of course, recently in the news, they've also been talking about this caravan of migrants who have been traveling from Central America through Mexico. It was reported that they were moving into the U.S. Now you have some outlets saying that they are have dispersed now in Mexico. Some still moving forward into the U.S. It sounds like some of them will still try to, but this was one of the big things that triggered a response from President Donald Trump, who he said, he was criticizing this caravan of migrants and the weak border security. He said that he had a plan to send National Guard troops to the United States southern border. Of course, it was Oregon's governor, Kate Brown, has just received this donation from George Soros, who is leading the campaign against Donald Trump's border plan. She's kind of in defiance here of Trump's plan. There's another article that just kind of summarizes what Brown's response is to what's happening at the border. From this report from Kobe 5, it reads, on April 4th, Department of Homeland Security Secretary Christian Nielsen said, quote, in an effort to prevent such a consequence, the president has directed that the Department of Defense and the Department of Homeland Security work together with our governors to deploy the National Guard to our southwest border to assist the Border Patrol. The president will be signing a proclamation to that effect today. Kate Brown responded saying that she will deny this request. They're forwarding some other reports from CNN who say that deployment can only be made if governors cooperate, can only do so if governors cooperate with the administration's request. Another quote they give, we do hope the deployment begins immediately, said Secretary Nielsen. I will continue to have conversations with the governors today. As you know, it's done through a memorandum of agreement, so we're working with all haste to agree with that. The deployment request by a sitting U.S. president is not entirely unprecedented. Both the Bush administrations and the Obama administration had previously also authorized the National Guard to deploy to the U.S.-Mexico border in similar requests. So you have most recent presidents also doing similar things. But Kate Brown is going to stand up against Trump's plan specifically. She says, Oregon Governor Kate Brown says that she won't allow Oregon National Guard troops to be deployed. She expanded on this in a tweet, and they give a link to the original tweet from Governor Kate Brown saying, if at real Donald Trump asks me to deploy Oregon Guard troops to the Mexico border, I'll say no. As commander of Oregon's Guard, I'm deeply troubled by Trump's plan to militarize our border. So they link to that tweet. They also mentioned that in another tweet, Governor Brown wrote, quote, there's been no outreach by the president or federal officials, and I have no intention of allowing Oregon's Guard troops to be used to distract from his troubles in Washington. That's what she says. Finally, the article, they remind us that in accordance with U.S. law, troops will not be able to perform any sort of law enforcement activity such as arresting illegal immigrants. Previous deployments saw troops assisting the Border Patrol with surveillance, investigatory aid, and transportation. So obviously, George Soros, his Open Society Foundation, these sort of open border policies, mass immigration, these are the sorts of things that the Open Society Foundation and George Soros has been in favor of. And you have the governor of Oregon coincidentally receiving the first ever donation by George Soros to an Oregon candidate. At the same time, she's leading this campaign to keep an open border and not enforce the border laws that Donald Trump is trying to crack down on. So that's an interesting coincidence, I guess. Again, the spokesperson for Brown is pretty vague about why they think they received this payment. I think that might have something to do with it. Again, also this news with George Soros, I'm seeing this in a few more outlets, actually. This is pretty damaging. This is really worrying, looking back at the Obama administration, how they had colluded with George Soros to influence the government of Albania. This is based off 32 pages of records released from Judicial Watch. I'll go through the Judicial Watch article. It's also from today. They released these 32 pages of records showing that the Obama administration sent U.S. taxpayers' funds to a group backed by billionaire George Soros, which then used the money to fund left-wing political activities in Albania, including working with the country's socialist government to push for highly controversial judicial reform, as they call it. The records also detail how the Soros operation helped the State Department review grant applications from other groups for taxpayer funding. The records were obtained in a May 26, 2017 Freedom of Information Act lawsuit against the U.S. Department of State and the U.S. Agency for International Development after both the State Department and the USAID failed to respond to a March 31st, 2017 FOIA request. The new documents, it's released by Judicial Watch, they show that the USAID funds had been funneled through that agency's civil society project in order to back Soros's left-wing Open Society Foundation. They're funneled through the civil society project into the Open Society Foundation run by George Soros. And his operations in Albania, specifically, particularly the Soros operation efforts to give the socialist government greater control of the judiciary. USAID reportedly gave $9 million in 2016 to the Justice for All campaign, which is overseen by Soros's East-West Management Institute. So this is taxpayer money being funneled through this other organization. Then you have about $9 million that ended up in this Soros-run East-West Management Institute as well. Then in March 2017, a group of 6 U.S. senators, led by Senator Mike Lee, sent a letter to then Secretary of State Rex Tillerson asking that he investigate charges that the U.S. government was using taxpayer funds to assist Soros in Albania. The letter said, quote, Foundation Open Society Albania and its experts, with funding from the USAID, have created the controversial strategy document for Albanian judicial reform. Some leaders believe that these reforms are ultimately aimed to give the prime minister and left-of-center government full control over the judiciary. And in the Albanian parliament, reportedly opposition leaders have labeled the strategy a Soros-sponsored reform. So that's even amidst the parliament themselves. They seem to be aware that this is heavily politically motivated. It's coming directly from Soros. He's seriously trying to collude and influence in the government here. They also go on to say that the new records released by Judicial Watch include an April 2016 memo from the U.S. Embassy in Tirana that reveals that the embassy sponsored a survey along with Soros's Open Society Foundation to measure Albanian citizens' quote knowledge, support, and expectations of justice reform. The Soros Group survey reported that 91% of respondents either fully support or somewhat support the need for judicial reform. Poll did not specify the type of reform the Soros group was seeking. Also, point to records dated from February 2017 show that the State Department used taxpayer funds to co-sponsor a second poll with the Open Society Foundation on judicial reforms that would essentially solidify the left's control of the Albanian government. The report notes that the U.S. Embassy's Public Affairs section and the Open Society Foundation, quote, each provided funding to a local organization to conduct a public opinion poll on attitudes towards the judicial reform effort. Records also reveal that the State Department gave the Soros organization direct input for its own program funding reviews in Albania. That's pretty worrying. You would think that there's quite a bit of opportunity for corruption from these organizations. You have the State Department giving the Soros organization input for its own program funding reviews. February 10th, 2017 report, they give another quote from the engagement with the Open Society Foundation for Albania, where they note that, quote, as one of the major assistance providers in Albania, representatives from the Open Society Foundation are frequently asked to participate in technical reviews of applications that we receive for funding. There's also another U.S. ambassador who was a holdover from the Obama administration who had been closely linked to Soros and the socialist government in Albania in May 2017. This is Donald Liu. He helped undermine Albanian opposition party plans to protest the upcoming parliamentary election by declaring that the U.S. would recognize the election results even if opposition parties refuse to participate. Liu has been described in the U.S. press as, quote, a driving force behind Albania's judicial reform. Final quote from Judicial Watch. Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton has talked about some of the problems with that have been revealed through this document, saying that the Obama administration quietly spent at least $9 million in U.S. taxpayer funds in direct collusion with left-wing billionaire George Soros's backing of a socialist government in Albania. It is particularly outrageous that the State Department allowed the Soros operation to help direct taxpayer funds to other groups. Finally, he says George Soros is a billionaire and he shouldn't be receiving taxpayer support to advance his radical left agenda to undermine freedom here at home and abroad. So that is getting, again, some coverage today. And at the same time, it does seem like a clear conflict of interest, as they point out. I also don't think that it is right that George Soros is receiving taxpayer support. And you have this other story that I just mentioned. George Soros is a pretty outspoken supporter of many Democratic candidates, but more recently he's getting even more involved here with this Oregon candidate. She's I know there's a variance of opinion over Donald Trump's border plan, but you have George Soros obviously getting involved here with a candidate who really, I think she's being rewarded for defying the president. I don't know. I don't think that George Soros should have that role exactly in our politics here. Let me know what you think. Leave a comment. You can leave a like on this video. It's greatly appreciated, and subscribe to the channel. Reminder, I'm over on patreon.com to patreon.com/realityreader. It's my name over there. Thank you everybody that has donated. Even $1 or $2 just gives me some extra time and resources to put back into the channel. Patreon.com, Reality Reader. Steemit. Also, I have my blog over on Steemit. Reality Reader, my name there. You can follow me. Let me know what you think in the comments. I will follow up again shortly. Thanks.